Like some comments? I really do. I like some comments. Don't care about you. I like some comments.
Well, the October faction, it says, doesn't it? So I guess that's what it's called. And we're in from the off, and what appears to be a run-of-the-mill, jock oining weirdo lad scenario soon reveals itself to be something else altogether, or at least trying to be. This lad's sister fares similarly, seemingly, but has less to say to torment her tormentors, and their old man sees a bigger picture and tries to teach them tolerance, or at least to question those innate prejudices we all have, no matter how right on we try to appear. Though seemingly Pops has a history of his own that he seems keen to leave well behind him. So far, so sympathetic. The mum we're not so sure about though, and is initially portrayed as though she might be a bit of a wrong'un, but it's pretty clear the kids dig dad though, and are mad keen to follow his footsteps in his old family business, though the old man's none too sure about any of that. Pretty soon the old skeletons begin tumbling out the wardrobe, and we start to get a panoramic view of who's who, and what's what, and why werewolves and all that. And then when Mum gets a good hiding, it's obvious that Daddy's going to have to start spilling the family beans, though he seems hip to console himself with how the youngsters are all growed up and how they might be further along than he wanted to realise, in some respects at least. So he grudgingly gets to granting their weird wishes and proceeds to getting them all hands-on with how it all works, and essentially how snuffing out baddies ain't all glitz and glamour like it's cracked up to be, but the youngsters are pretty steadfast and stoical regarding their chosen paths, and they clearly have each other's backs, whether the reasons behind the dutiful declarations stand up or not. Big do's and little do's, it's not a bad little read, all in all, ain't this? And it looks nice enough, no doubt about that. But for me, it can't ever really make up its mind if it wants to be hip or sincere. Because it's a far-flung fable few who can pull both off now, isn't it? So what happens is, it all kind of mangles together in a marginally misfiring amalgamation of the Addams Family and Monster Squad, fettled through the contemporary Archie horror filter. It's not bad, like I say, but that don't make it good either, really. I wanted to know what were going to happen, I guess. Certainly enough not to chuck towel in before end, but I weren't really that fussed either way how it turned out. The characters are all quirky enough, but the quirks don't have any real character. And while the story fizzes along right enough, the dialogue often feels clunky and overly twee, considering the sort of title it is, so comes across as a bit kind of disingenuous somehow. No spoilers are out, but though it resolves itself as much as it can, it's a bit of a nod and a wink towards an upcoming volume 2, but I've not bothered to see if that's the case, and I can't see myself sniffing it out anytime soon. Assuming it is. I don't bloody know, do I? On the buses, this is. Now we're talking. Yet another top stringer from the weekly Junior TV Times itself, looking whose well-informed editorial team, time after time after time after time, irrefutably prove themselves to have their thumbs firmly on the pulse of Britain's youth, effortlessly surfing the zeitgeist of the post-60s so-called modern society by catering to the forward-thinking whippersnappers of those wide-trousered, long-haired times. I mean, children of that age, be honest, who out there possessing even a soup song over a bar basic half-ounce of sense hasn't hankered over, nay prayed to get their grubby little hands on a Boss selection of tales colourfully portraying the illustrated, quote, adventures, unquote, of a couple of Workshire middle-aged bus drivers. Because I know I certainly did. Chucking a quite tyrannical inspector. Quite obvious to all young readers to be a barely, if at all, concealed colourful caricature of Adolf Hitler himself, no less. And whisking a tireless selection of age-inappropriate double, triple entendres. And yes, you've guessed it, folks. You've got yourselves an absolutely foolproof, surefire recipe for something. The never-ending cavalcade of crazy characters has been tailor-made to hit home with the hip readership, often effortlessly chatting the groovy street vernacular of the time with alarming alacrity, while seamlessly encouraging the readers to check out the day's cool TV shows to boot, working its mellifluous magic on many levels. It really is a blast, as, without fail, something happens, which only leads to something else happening, and so on. Plot lines that to the naked eye appear to make little or no objective sense are skillfully weaved in and out of an overarching quasi-narrative that just seem to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, vaguely adding more and more and more context to the big picture, like pieces of perfect patchwork in a quality quilt. A quilt about middle-aged, misogynistic, illustrated bus drivers. A rare delight. I mean, it goes without saying that I am, of course, assuming you are all more than familiar with the base material for this masterpiece. The long-running TV show of the same name. 3 feature films and all, weren't there, on back of this, I think? But if for any reason you're not, then, you know, one can only surmise that you've got something wrong with you. Seriously. So switch this cack off now and go and binge watch The Lot. You'll not regret it. And then come back and tell me honestly how they could not have made a weekly illustrated kids version of it. They just couldn't have. That's how. Yeah, so our expanding universe jumps in with a trio of, I'm guessing, 30-odd-year-old man boys, all growing older, but not all growing up. And that's who it's aimed at, seemingly, with its chat of Micronauts and Xbox and, I don't know, man, flipping Murphy's Mob and Simon and the Witch and what have you. And having kids, of course. I mean, of course. And all the girlfriends talk about similar stuff. Well, the kids part, any road. You know that television show 30 Summer that ran last century? Well, bully for you. You know, so do I. It were a big deal, wasn't it, by all accounts, but I never watched it when it were on, because I was too young to fancy it really. But I remember thinking at the time that I'd get round to watching it one day, when I were old enough to properly appreciate the kind of asinine claptrap that the trailers showed, while I were waiting for, Cracker or Northern Exposure to come on, or for the internet to get properly invented, or whatever. But the point is, I always assumed that I'd watched 30 Summer as an empathetic peer, sagely nodding along to its mature themes in soon-to-be middle-aged empathy. But then what happened were, one day I realised, all of a sudden, that I was too old for 30 Summer. I mean, sweet Rita Coolidge, man, however did that happen? But I were, and thought about how their pre-midlife aspirations and overconfidence and whatnot might get on my nerves. So I never bothered with it, after all. But I have it in my head that this is what it must have been like, but more contemporary, really. So, the lads are rocking Green Day t-shirts and chasing old school flames or whatever on Facebook and that. I mean, there's some decent dialogue that cuts to the chase regarding any Peter Pan pretensions, but it's clear enough that some of them are going to put up more of a scrap than the others before they allow themselves to be dragged kicking and screaming into bona fide adulthood, which occasionally is so robustly argued on the page that it occasionally comes off feeling written rather than spoken, if that makes any sense. It takes you out of it a bit. But I guess you'll flick by it all the same once you're in. I can't knock it, I guess. But there's not a great deal I can empathise with either, really. Before or after. You might, though. Give it a do and find out.
Like me some comments, I really do.